It's now my distinct honor to introduce today's graduation speaker. It's no coincidence that our most prominent politicians are often trained as attorneys. Think of Lincoln. Before he became president, he was one of the most successful corporate lawyers in Illinois. Further back in time, but closer to home, think of James Wilson, Penn's first law professor and one of the two primary authors of the U.S. Constitution. The law teaches you how to confront every fault line in society. And by overcoming our deepest social cleavages, lawyers and politicians alike have enabled us to perfect the nation's core principles. Our commencement speaker today epitomizes that professional ideal. Over the last quarter century, he has helped craft some of our nation's most fundamental laws, including, most recently, transformative oversight of the healthcare and financial industries. Christopher Dodd was first elected to Congress in 1974 at the age of 30, only a few years after graduating from law school. Public service was in his DNA. His father, Thomas Dodd, prosecuted Nazis at Nuremberg, started the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, won the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and served 2 Senate terms. For young Dodd, early service in the Peace Corps in South America confirmed this familial commitment. His life path was set. For after only 3 terms in the House, Dodd was elevated by the people of Connecticut to the Senate in 1980, serving there for 30 years, longer than any other representative in the state's history. Service over such a long period in vastly different political environments has required vision and political skill. In 2009, the Hill newspaper surveyed all the senators about which of their colleagues was the most bipartisan to work with and who the most partisan. Dodd was the only senator who made it onto both lists and near the top to boot. Now that is a testament to the subtle range and sophistication required to be effective in politics, knowing when to pursue fervently your supporters' strongest goals and when to compromise. As Kenny Rogers so famously put it, knowing when to hold them and when to fold them. You also have to be like people to do this. As our speaker once put it, I can have a good relationship with political enemies. That is quite a statement in today's hyper-partisan environment. A stalwart Democrat, chairman of the Democratic National Committee from 1995 to 1997, and a candidate for his party's presidential nomination in 2007, he has reached across party lines to find common goals and shared ideals, earning the trust and respect of both Democrats and Republicans. As a key participant in nearly every major policy debate over the past 3 decades, Senator Dodd authored or co-authored major legislation in the areas of education, health, financial services, foreign policy, and election reform. Senator Dodd is perhaps best known for bringing much-needed attention to children and education issues. He formed the first Children's Caucus in the Senate, authored the first child care legislation since World War II, and wrote the Family and Medical Leave Act, whose provisions have benefited over 50 million Americans. In a sense, Senator Dodd saved the best for last. In his final years in the Senate, he played a decisive role in writing and securing passage of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, and he was the principal author of the appropriately named Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. The impact of these bold and sweeping pieces of legislation will be felt and discussed and debated in our society for years to come. And many members of the graduating class may well spend large parts of their professional lives involved in their effective implementation. They are part of our country's and your future. In sum, Senator Dodd has been a happy and remarkably effective warrior, nor has he given up. Today, as chairman and CEO of the Motion Picture Association of America, Senator Dodd serves as the voice and advocate of the U.S. motion picture, home video, and television industries around the world. Appointed in March 2011, he leads the association's efforts to represent the interests of one of the most creative and productive industries in America. Senator Dodd has long been a champion of First Amendment rights and currently serves as the national chairman of Free Speech Week, an annual week-long celebration of freedom of speech and expression. So I think we can probably anticipate that it will have something provocative to say this afternoon. Please join me in welcoming the 2013 Commencement Speaker at Penn Law School, the Honorable Christopher J. Dodd.
Thank you very, very much, Dean, for that very, very gracious and thoughtful introduction. And let me thank all of you for being here today to participate in this glorious occasion. To the graduates, to the alumni, the trustees and faculty, of course, parents and relatives, friends of the university, and of course to the graduates in the class of 2013. I'm truly honored to be here, and I thank you immensely for the very, very gracious invitation. Dean Fitz, thank you very, very much for that introduction. Your remarks of introduction are almost as long as my commencement address, and I thank you for that this afternoon, because I'm all that stands between you and those diplomas, and I'm not unmindful of that today. A special congratulations. I'd be remiss if I didn't say so to the law school class president, Maddie Jitmer. Maddie worked in my Senate office for 3 or 4 years. She worked on the national health care legislation, my legislative department, on the Labor Committee, Health Committee. And Maddie, I thank you immensely for your contribution already to public life in our country. And what an honor it is to be with her today. And I suspect in part it explains my presence at this lectern as well. So I thank you, Maddie, for that. And to you, Jude Zabud, let me tell you, at the end of this program, I'm giving you a test in Dodd-Frank coming up here along the way. But I was thinking, you know, as Jude was talking today and looking behind you, behind me here in front of all of you, these remarkable LLM students, how fortunate we are in this country that they chose us to come here to the United States to continue their education. And our hope is, I think I can speak for many of us here, is that you go back to your nations of birth, that you'll bring back the message from our country, that we love this world, we care about it deeply, we want to see it peaceful and work together. And we hope that your experience here in Philadelphia, in the United States of America, for the time that you've been here, has been a rewarding one, a fruitful one, and that you'll come back often to be a part of our country. Congratulations to all of you. Various countries. As well. Let me also congratulate Gideon and for his award as well. We had a wonderful lunch together before the commencement exercise, and no greater honor, I suspect, Gideon, than to be rewarded and recognized by the students in a class. And so we had a wonderful conversation at lunch as well, so I thank you for that. And I have a great regard for this institution, its history, as you've heard already from the dean, its tradition of producing and hosting attorneys. The entire team, for instance, of Penn Law's preeminent Center for Technology, Innovation, and Competition. My good friend David Cohen, the Executive Vice President at Philadelphia's Comcast Corporation, is a 1981 graduate of Penn Law. My general counsel is here with me today at the Motion Picture Association. Henry Hoberman is also a graduate, 1985, and might point out, Maddie, he was also class president when he was here. Now, I want to tell you, I was preparing for these remarks. I tried to think back to my law school graduation and to remember what my commencement speaker had to say on that day. Not only can I not remember what he or she said, I have no idea even who was the commencement speaker. That's how memorable this part of the graduation ceremony is. But I thought I'd do a little history because I was fascinated by that particular fact, and I thought, when was the first commencement address ever given? And the best I could find, it was given in the 13th century at the University of Bologna in Italy, which may explain the derivation of that word in describing commencement addresses on so many occasions. Then I thought you might find it interesting if you could find what was the longest commencement address ever given and what was the shortest one ever given. And so I went back and looked, and there was a commencement address at Harvard University, which was 6 hours long. 3 hours in Greek, 3 hours in Latin, and at the end of it, there was an examination for the graduating students. I want to promise you I haven't prepared that one for you. I thought you might find more interesting the shortest commencement addresses ever given. And there were two that I could find that were great and interesting. One was given by Bob Hope at Georgetown University many years ago. And he got up and he recognized the faculty and the students and the administrators and, of course, the parents and relatives and students finally. And he turned to the graduating class and he said, as you prepare to leave these ivied halls of higher education, I just have 2 words of advice. Don't go. And he sat down. It was the entire length of his speech. My favorite one of all time, though, was given by Woody Allen. And Woody Allen was giving the commencement address at American University not many years ago. And he stood up at the podium at the moment of the commencement address. He turned to the audience and again recognized all the appropriate people who were present. And then he turned to the graduating class and he said the following. He said, my generation has left you a perfect world. Don't go out and screw it up. And he sat down his entire length of his education. So I promise you this afternoon it will be less than Harvard, a little longer than Bob Hope or Woody Allen. But I hope as well to share some thoughts with you along the way. But let me tell you this as well, that after your years of schooling, and as the dean pointed out, no more exams, you've paid your dues in many, many ways. From this day forward, if you wish to become instantly conversant in any social, political, or cultural topic, you can do what I urge many others to do now. You can simply go to the movies. For those of you who always meant to read F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby, but never quite got around to it, I am pleased to announce that the movie just opened last week at your local theater, and hope you'll go. For those of you who went to law school because of the prospect of a master's degree in physics terrified you, I have even better news. Iron Man 3 is in theaters now. Don't miss it if you can. And for the philosophers among you who never managed to read Plato's dialogue, or The Nature of Friendship, or the story of Bacchus, the Roman god of wine and revelry, I have best news of all. The answer to life's most perplexing philosophical questions will be imparted 11 days from now, when Hangover Part 3 opens nationwide. Get excited about this, I want you to. Of course, the kind of commencement address, what kind of commencement address would this be if I failed to dispense some meaningful career advice? So as they say in Hollywood, let me tell you a story. I was first elected, as the dean pointed out, in 1974, shortly after the resignation of President Richard Nixon, who you'll recall was embroiled, of course, in the Watergate scandal. My congressional class of 1974, all 75 of us, was sent to Washington almost as a protest, if you will, to the Nixon administration. Now, depending on how well you're aware of my voting record, it will probably shock you to learn that some of the best career advice I ever received as a new senator was from none other than Richard Milhouse Nixon. It is still considered bad form in some circles to say anything positive about President Nixon. But despite his ethical failings, which were serious, there's no denying that President Nixon knew a great deal about leadership and statecraft. And if there's one thing I've learned over my 36 years in public life, is that you can always learn from anyone, no matter how much you may disagree, as long as you're willing to listen to them. In addition to all of his significant shortcomings, many have forgotten that between 1968 and 1972, President Nixon expanded welfare benefits, fortified civil rights for women and minorities, he created the Environmental Protection Agency, Section 8 housing, and proposed a national health care plan that my good friend Ted Kennedy often regretted not embracing. But on to the story, if you will. In 1982, 2 years into my first term in the United States Senate, I picked up a book. It was written by President Nixon, entitled Leaders. The book was about the leadership skills of the men and women that President Nixon had known during his public career, and he knew a lot of them. Winston Churchill, Charles de Gaulle, Golda Meir, Zhou Enlai, and so many others. As I read the book, I was amazed by the former president's observations and insights. So I did something that many would find unthinkable. I wrote him a note and told him how much I enjoyed the book. Then President Nixon did something almost equally unthinkable in today's world. He wrote back. Quoting the infamous Mae West, quite unintentionally, I assure you, President Nixon wrote, "Come up and see me sometime." The former president's office was in New York in the Federal Building, no special identification on the door, just a small bronze nameplate announcing the office of Richard M. Nixon, 37th President of the United States of America. We sat in his small office while he discussed what, in his views, it takes to become a strong, influential leader. 30 years later, I still remember the 3 key criteria of a good leader that he shared with me on that day many years ago. First, he said a good leader must possess a bold point of view, one that is strong, yet malleable enough to adapt to changing times. Because, as he noted, if you want to lead, you must convince everybody else in the room or across the nation that it is in their interest to follow you. Second, a strong leader, he felt, must come from a great nation. He meant no disrespect to the leaders of smaller countries, but to borrow a more contemporary term, a great leader needs a major platform. And finally, and this is where you graduates come in, he said strong leaders typically emerge at moments when crises and storms are their most severe. So to you graduates today, allow me to state the obvious. We have our share of problems we urgently need you to help us solve. Woody Allen was wrong. We have not left you a perfect world. Our economy continues to idle along too slowly. In Washington, there is division, acrimony, and inertia. Public confidence in the financial services sector has eroded. Environmental threats, foreign policy, sinkholes, global health challenges, the list is long, very long. I urge you to walk straight into those storms today. The country needs you. This is not idle commencement address talk. I couldn't be more serious with you than to make that statement. Whether you become a corporate lawyer, a government lawyer, a public interest lawyer, or choose not to practice law at all, these are just some of the issues which occupy all of us as citizens of this country. The tools you've acquired here at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, memorialized by the diploma which you're about to receive, have prepared you to make that kind of a difference, to be strong, influential leaders on your watch. So bear with me while I tell you about a storm that I walked into after I left the Senate and became the CEO of the Motion Picture Association of America. I'm not suggesting the issue of intellectual property and copyright deserves equal billing with a failed economy, a dysfunctional Congress, or a foreign policy quagmire. But it is a very serious subject, a brewing storm, if you will, and an area in which you as attorneys can play a very significant role. I realize that most of you may not exclusively practice First Amendment or intellectual property law, but because of the legal education that you've received at this world-class institution, you'll be asked all the time to share your views and perspectives on legal and constitutional issues in many unconventional, non-legal settings. And in that capacity, each of you can and must be an influential and serious educator in our communities. The intellectual vigor that you've acquired here can be of value in circumstances as prosaic as a PTA meeting, when some overzealous parent proposes the banning of a piece of classic literature, or when someone offers to send you an unlawful link to a movie before it arrives in theaters. You're coming of age professionally during what I believe to be a new gilded age of creativity and innovation. In the arts and entertainment, the music industry, publishing, there is more creative content, more variety, and more quality than ever before. It every day seems to announce some new platform, some new architecture to access information, news, products, and entertainment. If you want to become a filmmaker, you can go to Hollywood, or you can shoot a film yourself and exhibit it on YouTube. You can go to Nashville, of course, and record a song. Or you can record it in your basement and post it on Facebook. You can write the legal thriller and try to break into the New York publishing business. Or you can publish it independently on Amazon.com. Each of you will be uniquely positioned at the center of this revolution as new attorneys, either as a creative artist, if you choose, or as a practicing attorney, if you choose, or both. I do not have to explain to this audience that the internet has made it faster and easier than ever before for creative content and ideas to take root. Think of all the thrilling opportunities that have exploded in just the past few years. But it is important to note as well that it has also never been easier or faster for these creative ideas to be unlawfully appropriated. Let me quickly add that while today I have a particular interest in the creative content produced by the film and television industry, the issue of intellectual property and copyright dwarfs the particular needs of this industry with which I am now fortunate to be involved. A spirited debate about the future of copyright law is already underway, and I hope that you will draw on your legal education and understanding to become involved in this issue of intellectual property and copyright law. It needs your attention. The conversation has already begun in the courts, in the media and think tanks, and at academic institutions like the University of Pennsylvania, where you already have a number of professors focusing on this subject matter. Advances in digital technology and the internet have fundamentally changed the way that intellectual property is created, how it is distributed and consumed today all over the world. If we believe there is a value in protecting the work of creative people, and we want to sustain the incentive to keep creating, we will need to be equally imaginative, I would argue, in protecting their creative content, as some have been in gaining free access to their work. Unfortunately, there are those who have, for obvious reasons, reduced this debate to the simplest of propositions. You must choose freedom of speech, free access to the internet, or Hollywood. The protection of intellectual property and free speech, as well as the internet that works for everyone, are concepts, in my view, that must be co-joined. A decade ago, Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg elegantly, in my view, explained the fine balance that must be struck between copyright protection and the First Amendment. In the decision Eldred versus Ashcroft, she wrote, and I quote, "The First Amendment securely protects the freedom to make or decline to make one's own speech. However, it bears less heavily when speakers assert the right to make in other people's speeches," end of quote. It must now become our challenge as a nation to build an internet that works for everyone. For in order to continue providing the world's greatest content, we must protect the rights of our creators and makers, so they can not only profit from their innovations, but will be further inclined to create more. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about this afternoon. 5 years ago, the independent film director, Catherine Bigelow, made a film about the Iraq War. It was called The Hurt Locker. Films such as The Hurt Locker are an artistic and financial gamble. Catherine Bigelow was tackling an extremely controversial topic. Artistically, the film was a triumph. At the 82nd Academy Awards, the film was nominated in 9 categories and won in 6, beating out Avatar as the best picture of the year. This small, independent film, produced on a relatively modest budget of $11 million, was a financial disaster. The movie was first released in the United Kingdom, where it was well received. By the time it opened in the United States, literally millions of pirated copies of the film were being unlawfully sold on street corners or streamed illegally across the internet. Consequently, the film became the lowest grossing movie to ever win the Best Picture at the Oscar or the Academy Awards. Now, some who claim to champion a free and open internet argue that those of us who believe in the value of intellectual property are on the wrong side of history. Every year they tell you that digital advances are making piracy easier, that attempting to prevent or dissuade someone from downloading illegal content will simply infuriate people, and theft of intellectual property will only continue. To them I say, if you want to be on the right side of history, then look no further than the city where we gather this afternoon and go to Independence Hall. It was there the framers of our republic created the legal infrastructure that unleashed the historically unprecedented creative genius that we call America today. We can all agree today that these framers were successful beyond their or our wildest dreams. Those 18th century radicals were smart enough to understand that by respecting and legally protecting this new nation's creative potential for limited durations, they could create a country of unparalleled opportunities, economic and otherwise. As the Supreme Court has said, the framers intended copyright to serve, and I quote them, as the engine of free expression. But innovation and creativity cannot flourish in an environment where only some are free to build businesses contingent on infringing the private property of others. The United States is a world leader in creativity, technological innovation, and economic growth because we have historically balanced the need to protect creative people's work while simultaneously promoting freedom of expression and expanding the internet that works for everyone. Now, since I just urged you to visit Independence Hall, may I also suggest that while you're in the neighborhood, you keep walking east down 4th Street in Philadelphia, just below Market, if I might add. In the 1700s, that address was a famous tavern, the Indian Queen Tavern, where Thomas Jefferson wrote much of the Declaration of Independence, including, of course, his famous line about our fundamental right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The notion that we all have the right, not necessarily to be happy, but to pursue happiness, is such a simple concept, yet one that was truly revolutionary when Mr. Jefferson articulated it more than 2 centuries ago. But the pursuit of happiness, while laudable, does have its limits. Most of us focus on outcomes, an idealized state of happiness, rather than the pursuit of it, in fact, the journey. With age, I've come to realize that it is during the journey that real life occurs, and during that journey, there are happy moments to be savored. But I've also come to realize that while I cherish the right to pursue happiness, I recognize that the state of happiness is often, more than not, determined by circumstances far beyond my control. Therefore, while the beauty, the lyrical beauty, of Jefferson's pursuit of happiness is so much more appealing, it was no doubt Jefferson's successful pursuit of his meaningful life that I suspect contributed to his savored moments of happiness. The ultimate form of happiness, of course, is the ability to make yourself useful to others, to your family, to your country, and of course to a cause. To sum it all up then, this afternoon at this great commencement exercise, as your commencement speaker, I'd urge all of you as graduates, in fact all of us, to make the most of your moments that lay ahead of you. Run towards those biggest, most stubborn storms and problems of your day. Live a meaningful life. More than anything else, enjoy the pursuit of your happiness, and above all, savor today. And thank you all for listening.